Now, as you would have heard, the Pentagon has launched a review of the Aukus defence pact to make sure it's aligned with President Trump's America First agenda. The Aukus deal, of course, was struck under Scott Morrison's prime ministership, his greatest accomplishment. ScoMo is still close to Donald Trump, and he was asked today whether the US president was locked in behind the agreement.
Yeah, I've always had that impression that he's always been very supportive. This is a Department of Defence review. This hasn't been initiated out of the White House. I mean, the White House obviously are very happy for it to proceed, and you would expect them to do that, just like it occurred in the UK.
ScoMo's pretty confident, as you saw. So I asked former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer whether Australians should be concerned.
I don't think there's any reason to be particularly concerned. No, I think the Americans will stick with the Aukus agreement under President Trump, and I think there is going to be a debate within the American system about selling to Australia Virginia-class submarines, not because of the technology of the submarines, but because the American administration will argue that they haven't got enough submarines and they can't build them fast enough. And so selling 2 or even 3 to Australia will disrupt their production schedules. But I think it'll go ahead pretty much as it's been designed.
That confidence is certainly in keeping with the Defence Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles. Here's what he had to say today.
We've known about the review for some time. We welcome it and we will engage with it. It's a very natural step for the incoming administration to take. So I do have a sense of confidence about the way in which AUKUS is playing out under the Trump administration, and that we will meet the pathway that we have committed to.
Alexander, though, if everything's so hunky-dory, why do the review? Could the Americans be concerned about our low levels of defence expenditure, and this is a way of shaking us down, if you like?
Well, there might be. I mean, I think they would be concerned about our low level of defence expenditure and the way the Australian Defence Force has become increasingly depleted. But I don't think in the end the Americans are going to cancel the AUKUS program. You have to remember this is a trilateral program, not a bilateral program. And Britain is the, if you like, second player in it, certainly the second most important player in it. They've announced in the last week or so they're going to build 12 nuclear-powered AUKUS-class submarines in the UK. So it won't be just about Australia. It will partly be about the UK. But I think they just want to, as a new government, review things and have a look at how it's all going.
Yeah, that's a crucial point, the fact that it's a trilateral agreement. Look, the architect of AUKUS from Australia's point of view was the former Coalition Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Here's what he's had to say.
Are you concerned by this Pentagon review into AUKUS?
No, I'm not. It's totally within their remit, as I've said, that incoming governments do reviews. Sir Keir Starmer did a review, and that resulted in the UK government being even more committed to AUKUS. As a result of that, the issues being raised are actually very well known.
So there we go, lots of soothing noises. But to this key point you mentioned, Alexander, that is the pressure on the production schedule of Virginia-class submarines for the Americans. Can they actually, in their time frame, manage to sell one to us? What's the solution there? Because you're very sceptical about our ability to build nuclear submarines in Adelaide. Is a UK submarine an option here, or are we just going to have to make sure we don't lose our spot in the American production schedule?
So I think there are 2 things here. First of all, there's the American production schedule, and that isn't running as fast as the administration would like. They're producing 1.2 submarines a year, and they need to increase that to 2 or 3 submarines a year. But nevertheless, they're very committed to increasing the schedule, so that may not turn out to be a problem. There is this logic that people need to think through, and that is the Americans say, if there are 30 submarines and 2 of them are Australian, then we, the Americans, have control of 28 and Australia of 2. And so we don't have control of as many submarines as might otherwise be the case. On the other hand, counter to that argument is the argument, well, the Americans will be better off with an ally working with them and having Australian submarines working in with them. I mean, above all, the greatest deterrence is not just having a strong defence force, but having a strong alliance.
Now, I've got to get your thoughts on another issue, and that is the extraordinary move of Australia to sanction 2 Israeli government ministers. The Foreign Minister Penny Wong, when she announced this yesterday, had this to say.
We believe a two-state solution is the only way to end the cycle of violence. And, regrettably, it is also clear that the Netanyahu government rejects it.
Alexander Downer, how would you characterise this decision and its likely ramifications?
Well, it's glib. It's glib to say a two-state solution will solve the problem. There have been various offers of two-state solutions to the Palestinians from 1948 onwards, and they have always rejected those offers. So the day that they turn up and agree to negotiations for a two-state solution will be a big day, I can tell you that. Secondly, I think this idea of sanctioning individual ministers in a liberal democracy where cabinet operates on the basis of collective responsibility in Israel as it does in Australia, I think it's an extraordinary decision. I mean, it sets a whole set of new precedents. Why it begs the question, why not sanction politicians from other countries who you don't agree with and who you think express views that are a bit too extreme? What about sanctioning some of the Chinese ministers responsible for the maltreatment of the Uyghurs? What about sanctioning politicians in Germany who you think are too right-wing and dangerous, like politicians in Alternative for Deutschland? I mean, where does it end? And it begs another question: why Israel? Why a liberal democracy like Israel has its ministers singled out by the Australian government? You can only wonder why Israel is picked on in this way.
You can only wonder indeed. A different standard applied to Israel always. Thanks so much for joining us, Alexander.
It's a pleasure.